5 True Unexplainable Events Horror Stories. 1. I've always lived in this quaint, old house. Nestled on the outskirts of town, it had been in my family for generations. It was the kind of place that exuded warmth and familiarity, the very essence of home. But that was before it happened, before I began hearing those haunting echoes. It started innocently enough, just faint whispers that I dismissed as my imagination. I'd be alone in the house, perhaps reading in the dimly lit living room, and I'd hear them. Distant voices, murmuring, like a clandestine conversation happening in a hidden corner of the house. But whenever I'd try to locate the source, they'd fade away, leaving me in silence. At first, I brushed it off as an odd quirk of an old house settling, the creaks and groans playing tricks on my ears. But then things began to escalate. Objects would move, ever so slightly, when I wasn't looking. A chair that had been pulled out would be pushed back under the table, or a book I'd left on the shelf would be found on the floor. I told myself it was just stress, my mind playing tricks on me. But then came the footsteps. Late at night, when I was lying in bed, I'd hear them pacing back and forth in the hallway just outside my door. Slow, deliberate steps, as though someone was pacing with purpose. My heart would race as I strained to listen, but the footsteps would abruptly stop as soon as I dared to open the door. One night, I decided to confront whatever was tormenting me. I armed myself with a flashlight and crept out of my room, determined to catch a glimpse of the source of my terror. The hallway was dim, but I could see that no one was there. Just an empty corridor, eerily quiet. But as I turned to go back to my room, I heard it, a child's laughter. Clear and unmistakable, it echoed down the hallway, chilling me to the bone. I rushed to investigate, but there was no child, no one at all. Just the echoes of that laughter, fading away. I began to avoid my own home, seeking refuge with friends and family, trying to convince myself that I was losing my mind. But the echoes followed me. They whispered in the background of my life, a constant reminder that I was not alone. I hired paranormal investigators, skeptics who assured me they could explain the phenomena. They set up cameras and recording devices throughout the house, but their faces grew pale as they reviewed the footage. They had no answers, only more questions. As time passed, the echoes grew louder and more persistent. They whispered in the walls, echoed through the floors, and mocked me in the darkness. I could no longer deny the truth, I was trapped in a nightmare that defied explanation. And now, as I sit in the dimly lit living room, the whispers have grown deafening. They are no longer confined to the shadows, but surround me, drowning out all rational thought. I can feel their presence closing in, and I fear that soon, I will become one of their haunting echoes, lost forever in the unexplainable horrors of this house. 2. I've always considered myself a rational person, someone who scoffed at tales of the supernatural and scoffed at the idea of unexplainable phenomena. That was until I moved into this remote cabin in the woods, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. My escape from the urban chaos turned into something I couldn't comprehend. The first sign that something was amiss came on the third night. As I lay in bed, I noticed a faint, rhythmic tapping sound. At first, I dismissed it as a tree branch scraping against the window. But the tapping grew louder, more persistent, as if someone or something was trying to get my attention. I got out of bed and approached the window, ready to shoo away whatever nuisance was causing this disturbance. But when I peered outside, I was met with an impenetrable wall of darkness. It was as if the cabin was surrounded by a thick, black void that absorbed all light. I couldn't see a single tree, nor the moon or stars that should have been in the night sky. I backed away from the window, my heart racing. I felt a deep sense of unease, but couldn't rationalize what was happening. My phone was useless, it showed no signal, no way to contact the outside world. Panic began to set in as I realized I was completely cut off from civilization. The tapping sound continued, growing louder and more insistent. It seemed to come from all directions, as if the very walls of the cabin were alive with some unseen force. I covered my ears, trying to block out the eerie noise, but it persisted, driving me to the brink of madness. Desperation led me to try to leave the cabin, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if it had been fused shut. I felt trapped, cornered by the unexplainable horrors outside and the inexplicable force holding me within. With no other options, I retreated to my bed, pulling the covers tightly around me. The tapping, now a cacophony, seemed to be mocking me, as if it knew I was defenseless. I tried to sleep, to escape this waking nightmare, but the hours passed in agonizing silence, punctuated only by that relentless tapping. Days turned into weeks, or at least I think they did. Time lost all meaning in that endless night. I survived on meager rations and water from the cabin's dwindling supply, all the while tormented by the maddening sound that echoed through my mind. I don't know how long I can endure this unending torment, this inexplicable horror. I've tried everything to escape, but there's no way out. All that remains is the darkness and the ceaseless tapping, a cruel reminder that I am trapped in a nightmare with no explanation, no hope of rescue, and no end in sight. 3. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. To me, the world was a rational place governed by scientific laws. But that was before I moved into the old Victorian house on Elm Street. The first time I heard it, I was alone in the living room, engrossed in a book. It was a faint whisper, almost imperceptible, like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. I dismissed it as my imagination, a trick of the wind outside, or perhaps the house settling. But then it happened again, louder this time. The whisper seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. I put down my book and strained to listen, but I couldn't discern any words, only hushed, indistinct murmurs that sent shivers down my spine. I decided it was an issue with the plumbing or the heating system. I called in a repairman, but he found nothing wrong. The pipes were fine, the walls were solid, and the heating system was in perfect working order. The whispers, however, continued. They grew more insistent, more tangible. It was as if the walls themselves were trying to communicate with me. I couldn't make out the words, but the urgency in those murmurs was undeniable. Night after night, I lay awake in my bed, listening to the relentless whispers. They seemed to congregate around my bedroom, growing louder and more agitated as the hours passed. I couldn't escape them. I couldn't sleep. I was being driven to the brink of madness. Desperate for answers, I invited a team of paranormal investigators into my home. They brought with them an array of equipment, audio recorders, electromagnetic field detectors, and infrared cameras. They assured me they would get to the bottom of this unexplainable phenomenon. As they set up their equipment, the whispers seemed to grow excited. They swirled around the room, forming an invisible vortex of sound. The investigators' faces paled as they reviewed their findings. They played back the audio recordings, and the whispers were there, clear as day, but still indecipherable. One investigator muttered something about a portal or a rift, a gateway between our world and another. But his words were drowned out by the incessant whispers that filled the room. They seemed to be mocking us, taunting us with their impenetrable secrets. The investigators left, their equipment unable to shed light on the inexplicable horror that had taken over my life. I was left alone with the whispers, which had now become a constant, maddening presence. I can't take it anymore. The whispers have consumed me, invaded every corner of my mind. I don't sleep. I don't eat. I only listen to the unexplainable voices that have taken over my world. I fear that I will never escape the relentless torment of the whispering walls, and that I will be driven to madness by the inexplicable horror that has become my reality. 4. I've always been drawn to antiques, fascinated by the stories they hold and the history they carry. But when I stumbled upon that ornate, full-length mirror at the flea market, little did I know that it would become the source of an unexplainable horror that would haunt my every moment. The mirror was beautiful, a work of art with an intricately carved wooden frame and an aged, slightly tarnished surface. It was the kind of piece that would add character to my otherwise modern apartment. I bought it without a second thought. The first night after I brought it home, I noticed something odd. As I walked past it, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of movement in the mirror's reflection. I chalked it up to my tired eyes playing tricks on me and continued about my evening. But then, the following evening, I saw it again. This time, I was sure of it, a figure, fleeting and shadowy, moving behind me in the mirror. My heart raced, and I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just an empty room bathed in the soft glow of lamplight. I told myself it was my imagination, stress perhaps, manifesting in my tired mind. But the mirror had other plans. Night after night, the shadowy figure grew more distinct, more present. It was as if someone was trapped within the mirror, desperately trying to reach out to me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. I watched in helpless terror as the figure's movements became more deliberate. It seemed to be mimicking my actions, copying my gestures, but with an eerie, disjointed delay. I tried covering the mirror with a sheet, but that only made things worse. The figure's movements became erratic, as if it was struggling to break free from its mirrored prison. It tapped on the glass, wrapped its fingers, and even mouthed words I couldn't understand. Desperation led me to seek help. I contacted a paranormal expert, who arrived with an array of equipment and a sense of skepticism. But as soon as he saw the mirror, his confidence wavered. He muttered something about a malevolent spirit trapped in the glass. Together, we attempted to communicate with whatever was inside the mirror, using candles, Ouija boards, and incantations. But the figure grew more agitated, its movements frantic and unpredictable. It lashed out, shattering the glass with a deafening crash. The room was plunged into darkness, and when the lights came back on, the mirror was whole again, and the figure was gone. But its presence remained, etched into my mind, haunting my every reflection. Now, I can't bear to look into any mirror. The figure from the cursed antique mirror still lurks in the corners of my vision, waiting to escape its inexplicable prison. And I am left with the unshakable horror of knowing that something beyond explanation lingers just beyond the glass, waiting to claim me. 5. I had always been an admirer of antique clocks. Their intricate craftsmanship and the rhythmic ticking of their gears had an inexplicable allure to me. So, when I came across the old grandfather clock at a local estate sale, I couldn't resist the temptation to make it mine. The clock was magnificent, with a rich mahogany case and a face adorned with ornate details. It stood tall and imposing in my living room, its pendulum swinging with a hypnotic grace. Every hour, it would chime with a deep, melodious tone that echoed through my home. For weeks, everything was as it should be. The clock's presence added a touch of elegance to my life. But then, one fateful evening, as I was sitting in my favorite armchair reading a book, I noticed something strange. The chimes began to sound, signaling the arrival of 9 p.m. But they didn't stop. The clock kept chiming over and over, as if stuck in some kind of loop. I rushed over to it, trying to silence the relentless sound, but the clock's pendulum swung with an unnerving fervor, and the chimes showed no sign of stopping. Panicking, I called a clock repairman, who arrived promptly. He examined the clock carefully but found no issues with its mechanism. It should have been impossible for the chimes to continue like this. As a last resort, he unplugged the clock from the wall, and the chimes finally fell silent. Relieved, I thanked the repairman and retired for the night. But my relief was short-lived. At precisely 3 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of ticking. The clock, despite being unplugged, had come back to life. Its hands moved relentlessly, ticking away the seconds, minutes, and hours with a precision that defied explanation. I couldn't understand it. I had no choice but to remove the clock's pendulum and lock it away in the attic. For a few days, peace returned to my home. But then, I noticed something even more disturbing. Time itself had stopped. The world outside my window stood frozen, as if caught in a photograph. Birds hung motionless in the sky, cars sat immobilized on the street, and people were suspended mid-step on the sidewalk. I was trapped in a silent, unchanging world. Desperation drove me back to the attic, where I retrieved the clock's pendulum. I reattached it, hoping against hope that it would restore time to its natural flow. But as soon as the pendulum swung, time began to move backward. The days rewound, seasons changed in the blink of an eye, and I found myself reliving moments I had long since forgotten. It was a maddening, unexplainable horror. I tried to destroy the clock, but it was indestructible, immune to my every attempt. Now, I'm trapped in a never-ending cycle, watching as time itself warps and bends around me. Days turn to nights, and nights to days, all while I remain helplessly bound to the clock's unexplainable power. The ticking never stops, and I am condemned to witness the relentless march of time, a prisoner of a clock that has stopped time itself.
Which story caught your attention the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Check out my website in the description below to see what I'm writing. And just below that are some suggestions related to what we talked about today. Peace.